Okay, let's unpack this mystery that, well, we all experience but maybe don't think about too deeply. Anesthesia. You
Right.
go in, you're out, you wake up. It's just fundamental for modern surgery, isn't it?
But how does it actually work?
It really is a marvel. And what's fascinating is that even now, the exact ways it works are still being studied, still debated by the experts.
Which is exactly what we're diving into today. So you, our listener, sent us some really interesting stuff from a discussion at Harvard Medical School. Picture this: Sadhguru,
The spiritual teacher.
in conversation with Dr. Emery Brown, who's a major voice in anesthesiology, and Dr. Nicholas Schiff, a top neurologist. Quite a mix.
Oh, absolutely. You've got the clinical side, the neuroscience, brain stuff, and then this introspective yogic perspective on consciousness itself. It's a really rich combination.
So our mission here is basically to pull out the most compelling ideas from that chat for you. And the whole thing seemed to turn on this really big question Sadhguru asked early on.
Does anesthesia actually touch consciousness? Or is it more about, just wiping the memory of what happened?
And that question just blew the whole discussion open, really, into what even is consciousness.
Exactly, because how you define that word completely changes how you see what anesthesia is doing.
For sure. It means different things in different fields.
Right. So maybe let's start with the modern neuroscience view. How anesthesia works according to, well, science right now. Dr. Emery Brown was pretty clear it's not like flicking an off switch on the brain.
That's a really important point. The brain doesn't just go quiet. Its activity changes dramatically.
Yeah, he explained that these anesthetic drugs, they cause these really strong, almost unnatural rhythms. Oscillations, he called them, in the brain circuits.
Right, like the brain's normal chat network just gets drowned out by this loud, repetitive beat.
He used that analogy, didn't he?
The Tacoma Narrows Bridge.
Yeah.
Galloping Gertie.
Ah, yeah. That bridge that started swaying like crazy in the wind and just tore itself apart.
Exactly. His point was, under anesthesia, these strong oscillations kind of shake the brain's communication lines so much that the normal messages just can't get through between different areas.
And that coordinated communication is what neuroscientists think is needed for, well, consciousness as we usually experience it.
Precisely. It disrupts the network.
Which makes sense,
Yeah.
Explains why you might feel fuzzy or have memory gaps afterwards. Your brain's been doing this weird rhythmic dance.
Yeah.
And it also points to why EEG monitoring during surgery is so useful. Anesthesiologists can actually see those patterns.
Yeah, they can watch the brain's electrical activity and adjust the drugs to keep the patient in that specific state, not too deep, not too light. It's about managing that altered activity.
And linking this to neurology, Dr. Schiff's work, right, with patients recovering consciousness after brain injuries.
Absolutely. His research is all about understanding those brain activity patterns needed for awareness, sometimes even trying to jumpstart them again.
So, looking at how anesthesia temporarily messes with brain communication gives clues about recovery from other states where consciousness is impaired.
Definitely.
Yeah.
They feed into each other, those fields of study. Okay, so that's the neuroscience angle, more or less. How about we switch gears to Sadhguru's perspective? It comes from a whole different tradition.
Okay, yeah. And heads up, the terminology shifts here. Sadhguru was saying that in yogic terms, what we usually call consciousness, just being awake and aware, is actually jagruti, wakefulness.
That distinction is crucial. He's not saying anesthesia removes wakefulness necessarily, but that wakefulness isn't the same as this deeper thing he calls consciousness.
Right. And then he kind of threw a curveball at the idea that the brain is the only place for intelligence and memory.
Oh yeah, that was fascinating. He suggested that every single cell, right down to our DNA, holds a massive amount of memory.
Right?
Way more than the brain. Evolutionary memory, even.
Just pause on that. Your skin cells remembering stuff from ancient ancestors.
Right.
A huge idea.
It really expands where we think intelligence and memory live in us. Not just the brain, but the whole system.
Exactly. And he also critiqued what he saw as this Western obsession with thought. He argued yogic science doesn't see thinking as the be-all and end-all.
Right. He described thought as mostly just recycling old data, not really direct perception. He contrasted it with directly sensing your own internal state, your chemistry, as he put it.
He used that cobra analogy, didn't he?
Yeah.
Judge the snake by its current vibe, its chemistry, not just by the thought that it might bite you based on past ideas.
Yeah, emphasizing direct experience over intellectual analysis.
He also mentioned that even when we are awake, in that jagruti state, people have different levels of alertness, you know?
Sure, we all know that feeling.
And then he said something interesting about the dream state, swapna, that it can actually be more profound than being awake sometimes.
His reasoning was that because the outside world is shut off, the lights are off, he said you might connect more directly with your inner stuff.
Like being in a dark cinema, yeah. More immersed. Then he mentioned sushupti, deep sleep, where there's still some awareness. And finally, turiya, or chika. That's what he called true consciousness.
And the key thing about chika, for him, is that it's intelligence without memory, unbound by it.
He sees memory as the thing that actually creates our sense of being separate individuals. This is me, that's you, based on our different memories.
Ah, the soap bubble analogy. That was a good one.
Right. Memory is the soap film making the bubble, giving it boundaries, but the air inside. That's the shared consciousness, Chita, when the bubble pops.
It all merges back. No more my air or your air.
Yeah. And the size of your bubble, how much consciousness your memory structure holds, kind of defines your life's scope.
So from that view, maybe anesthesia just affects the bubble, the memory part, but not the air inside, not the cheetah itself.
Okay, which leads neatly into their discussion about time and space and this idea of disengagement. Sadhguru shared that personal story.
The enlightenment experience where hours felt like minutes?
Yeah. And he immediately connected it to how time gets warped under anesthesia.
That really grounds his perspective, connecting his own experience to the clinical phenomenon.
He talked about how our sense of time is tied to physical cycles, sun-up, sundown, seasons. But if you disengage from the body and its memories,
then your sense of time and even space starts to dissolve. Like on a treadmill, he said. Lots of movement, going nowhere.
That's a good one. Expending energy, but fundamentally staying put.
Yeah.
And he used that footprint analogy too. The physical universe we perceive is like one tiny footprint on an infinite beach.
We get obsessed with the footprint, our little life and body, and miss the whole beach, the vastness around it.
Right. And the yogic view, he said, is that only time really exists fundamentally. Space is just a consequence of time interacting with physicality. You mentioned kala.
Time and emptiness or space, yeah. And Mahakala time beyond those cycles.
So maybe that feeling of timelessness under anesthesia is a glimpse of that, a result of detaching from our usual memory-bound physical reality.
It's a compelling thought, which led Dr. Brown to ask the big practical question, didn't it?
Yeah, how can we actually use any of this? Can these ideas improve anesthesia?
A fair question. Bridging the mystical and the medical.
Sadhguru, prefaced it by saying he's no anesthesiologist, but he talked about pain being protective. But then he suggested, what if we could monitor the neurological system more directly? Not just heart rate, blood pressure, the usual stuff.
To get a finer level of control with less interference.
Exactly. And he brought up marma points from yoga and Kalari martial arts.
These specific points on the body, right? That can supposedly block pain when manipulated.
Yeah. He suggested maybe, just maybe, by targeting the neurological system in a similar, precise way, you could achieve anesthesia with way less medication.
Like a tiny fraction of what's used now. And Dr. Schiff added something there, too, about the heart-brain connection being more intricate than we thought.
Right, suggesting these systems are all deeply interconnected in ways we're still figuring out. Okay, shifting again. They got into what Sadhguru called the problem with human beings.
Ah, yes. This was quite a section. Some deep observations here.
He drew that line between intelligence and intellect. Said we have amazing intellects, but maybe aren't that intelligent fundamentally. His example was food.
Right. Animals just know what to eat, but we're endlessly confused about diet. It highlights the difference between instinctual intelligence and our complex, often contradictory thinking.
And his main point was that so much human suffering comes not from now, but from memory dwelling on the past and imagination worrying about the future.
The story of the woman with memory loss who was always joyful, that really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. Are our own advanced abilities, memory, and imagination actually our biggest problems sometimes?
Yes, it's like we have this supercomputer mind, but no user's manual.
Yeah. And the line between sane and insane is just socially managed, based on how much control we seem to have over our thoughts, which led to that monkey experiment.
Oh, yeah. Try not thinking of a monkey for 10 seconds. Impossible.
Shows how little control we actually have, right?
Absolutely.
So then, what is true intelligence? He described intellect booty like a knife. Sharp, good for cutting things apart, analyzing.
But not necessarily for understanding things by bringing them together through inclusion.
Exactly. And he simplified the 16 parts of intelligence down to 4 key ones. Buddhi, intellect, ahankara, identity ego, Mana's memory, and Chitta, consciousness.
And the link between ahankara, our identity, and buddhi, our intellect, was crucial. How our sense of me directs how we think.
If you have a small identity, your intellect works within those limits. You mentioned that old Indian practice.
Aham Brahmasmi, establishing a cosmic identity, I am the universe, before you even start learning.
Right. To stop knowledge, just reinforcing a tiny ego. So intellect serves the whole, not just the little me.
It's a profound idea about the responsibility that comes with knowledge and intellectual power.
And finally, Chitta, that pure consciousness, intelligence untouched by memory.
Which brought them, near the end, to near-death experiences.
Yeah. Sadhguru talked about shunya meditation as a kind of conscious practice of dying, learning to disengage from the body at will.
He sounded a bit skeptical about the common NDE stories, though. Angels, tunnels.
He suggested those might be shaped by fear or cultural ideas we already have about death.
His view is more that death is just a transition, not an ending, like moving between dimensions of life.
He used the body constantly renewing itself as an example. We're always losing cells, but we don't feel like we're dying.
So anesthesia creates a disengagement that feels a bit like death, maybe, but isn't the real deal. It's temporary.
Right. And that anecdote about the man who forgot his wife's name.
I called her honey, sweetie, darling constantly.
Yeah. Funny, but it showed how losing one faculty, like specific memory, might paradoxically smooth over other perceived problems.
It's a complex picture, isn't it?
So, okay, bringing this deep dive home, we've looked at anesthesia shaking up brain communication.
Dr. Brown's oscillations, yeah.
Contrasted with Sadhguru's view. Maybe it affects wakefulness and memory, the bubble, but not the underlying consciousness, the air, or Chitta.
We explored how memory shapes everything, time, space, suffering.
And the potential for maybe needing less anesthetic if we understood the neurological system better, like those Marma points.
And maybe, just maybe, that state under anesthesia, that disconnection from memory and normal time, it gives a tiny hint of something beyond our usual experience.
Which leaves a final thought for you, the listener. If Sadhguru is right, and a lot of our struggles really do come from memory and imagination, what happens if we understand that better?
What possibilities open up not just for medicine, but for how we live day to day?
Yeah. What does this whole exploration tell you about your own consciousness, your own awareness?
Yeah.
Definitely something to chew on.
Keep pondering.